got the beer in our bucket, I've attached to the bucket a hose. Attached to the hose is a stopper to control the flow. I've got my caps handy in a little bucket here. I've got 4 bottles ready to go. We've got 2 types of bottles. I've got the standard green PET bottles available at most brewer supply places, ½ liter, 1 liter size. You can also use clear bottles. We've got some water bottles and soda bottles. Very inexpensive way to go, recycling. The disadvantage of a clear bottle, of course, is susceptible to light. So if you use these sorts of bottles, make sure you keep them stored well in the dark. To fill a bottle, simply insert the hose, release the stopper, and let it flow. Important when you're doing this, as you're stopping and starting, is not to tip over your bottles. I commonly fill a couple and then stop and make sure I've got all of my lids nice and tight. Instead of bottling, you may want to keg your beer. It's easier to fill a keg than it is to fill dozens of bottles.
Turn it on. Yeah.
On the other hand, you need some expensive equipment: the keg, the CO2 tank, the regulator, and a tap. And keep an eye on it so it doesn't overflow.
Now, let's retrace each step in a little more detail. Step 1 is called mashing, which means steeping the cracked malt in hot water for about 60 minutes to 2 hours, depending on your recipe. In the mashing phase, the sugars and enzymes are released from the malt.
Looks good.
Step 2, sparging, is where the sweet wort, that is the sugary liquid, is separated from the spent grains by sprinkling hot water onto the grain bed.
Step 3, the boil, brings clarity to the wort, and through the addition of the hops, the bitterness profile to your beer.
In fermentation, step 4, the yeast converts sugars extracted from the grains into alcohol and carbon dioxide, resulting in that nectar we call beer. Fermentation is a 2-stage process. The short and vigorous primary fermentation stage is where the yeast does most of the heavy lifting. In the longer secondary fermentation stage, the yeast continue their work, but at a slower rate, and the suspended particles in the beer slowly settle out.
In the 5th and final step, we bottle our beer. We use the term bottling loosely. Depending on the style of the beer you're making and how you intend to serve it, you might be putting it into bottles or into small kegs. Some homebrewers who keg their beer skip the secondary fermentation stage and let their beer finish up in the keg. You may have seen this at your local pub. It's called cask conditioning.
At the end of these 5 steps, you will be welcomed by a glass of your own quality beer. Cheers.
Cheers.
We hope that you found Brewing Made Easy enjoyable and informative. So until our next batch, cheers.